Hey guys, we're back for another live Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I hope you're looking forward to some banshees, some almost murder, and that's what some of the stories are about, so I'm looking forward to it. I hope you enjoy it. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. I'm just waiting for people to jump on here, and we'll get started. The show starts at 7 p.m. every Sunday. If you want to share it out, I greatly appreciate it. If you want to send me stories of your own, always remember you can get a hold of me on our group page on Facebook, our fan page. We are about 85 members short of 1,500 members, which is a big deal, I think. And last week, we were up to 2.6K views. So there was a lot of people last week that checked us out. So kind of proud of that. I hope you guys enjoy, and like I said, I'll be here the entire time. If you would like to ask me questions during the podcast, or you want to give me, some insights to the stories, a lot of my viewers are paranormal researchers. It's always fun to hear their take on the different personal experiences that are in the stories. So feel free to chat with me in the comment log down below. Like I said, I'll be here the entire time. So let me do a time check, and we'll get started.
Everyone here at the Rift Radio Network would like to welcome you to tonight's special broadcast. This work is protected by Creative Commons license. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Beyond Earth Healing, your source for alternative and holistic full healing services by Reverend Kayla Ray. Beyond Earth Healing offers various approaches to energy healing to match your healing needs. She is led by her guides, angels, and more to help you heal. Located out of Lockport, New York, you may contact her at 716-550-3881 or at www.beyondearthhealing.com.
The Skeleton Key, this mystical shop found exclusively on Facebook, is stationed in Blossom, Texas. Purchase all of your very own unique religious, spiritual, and metaphysical items, to include the beginner altar kits. Find them today on Facebook. Remember, you've always had the key.
Welcome to the Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. And now your host, Christina Spencer.
Well, hello there. Come on in and get cozy by the fireplace. Let me get settled into my old rocking chair, and I'll tell you a couple stories. Haunting stories. Stories that are not for the faint of heart. Some of these stories may not be about hauntings per se, but nonetheless will haunt you. Because after all, some of the most scary things in life are not ghosts and demons, but the people we cross on the street. If you're brave enough, keep listening. If not, get up and leave now, because you'll never be the same. Don't say I didn't warn you. Welcome to the Haunting Stories from the Old Rocking Chair. The Laughing Children by the 80s Slasher Librarian. Please check out his YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/the 80s Slasher Librarian. He turns out-of-print slasher like Jason, Freddy, Chucky, Michael, and more, novelizations, and tie-in books into audiobooks, narration, so everyone can enjoy them. The used copies are getting harder to find and usually cost hundreds of dollars, so he does his best to try to help out the horror community, and if you could, spread the word. Okay, so back to the story. I am a 32-year-old man. Yet it is broad daylight as I write this post because what I'm about to share haunts me to this day, to the point that merely thinking about it, or in this case, typing the memory, is enough to send chills down my body and make me feel like a terrified child. I've only told this story to a handful of people over the past 10 years because of how terrifying an experience it was for me. But I feel like it has to be therapeutic to get it off my chest and share with others. Maybe others have had similar experiences. If so, please let me know. To tell this story and give it justice, I have to tell you of an experience that happened 3 years before the terrifying encounter this post is about. Buckle up, this will be a long post, but definitely not boring. My name is Joshua, but I will change the names to protect the privacy of the others involved in the story. I live in Arkansas, and in the late 2003, near the middle of fall, right before it starts getting really cold, my wife and I were invited to camp with friends of mine and his girlfriend at Sugarloaf Lake in Oklahoma. I say camp, but the actual plan was to meet at Sugarloaf, and my friend, we'll call him Bob, wanted to take me and my wife around to some paranormal places in the Sugarloaf area. So we got there around 7 p.m. I was driving a white Ford 1996 F-150. Bob was driving a 1980-something white Celebrity. It really was a piece of crap vehicle. Anywho, it was getting late dusk, and it was becoming dark, and we climbed into Bob's car, and he took us around the area. First to an old abandoned house, but other than some raccoons rustling around, it was a 2-hour waste of time. Then he took us to a graveyard that was supposed to be haunted. Again, a bust. Then an old church that was run down and supposed to be haunted. Once again, yawn. At this point, it was getting close to midnight. My wife and I were getting pretty bored, and I spoke up to Bob saying, "Man, this really hasn't been that freaky of a night." That's when Bob smiled, saying he was saving the best for last. He handed me a Polaroid picture of a hillside covered in trees and daylight. I asked him what it was, and he asked me if I saw a house or any type of light pole or anything in the picture, to which I replied no. He took the picture back and said that's because there isn't, and there's no power lines either. About this time, he turned down an old dirt road and passed a small house. Then after it was 2 miles of dirt road with woods on one side and a barbed wire fence on the other, with about 2 acres of field connecting to a wooded hillside. Nothing to light the night except a full moon above our heads and a clear, starry sky. After what seemed like forever, he stopped the car and told us all to get out. We did as he asked. He walked us to the side of the car where the fence, field, and wooded hillside was. He looked at his cell phone, which his phone and mine had no signal. This was 2003, and this area had no cell towers, but he looked at his phone and said it was 11:57 and told us to watch the middle of the hillside. Even at complete dark, I could tell this was the same field and hillside for the picture. 2 minutes go by and nothing has changed. Then exactly at midnight, a small light flickers on in the middle of the hillside. A chill runs down my back as my wife, Bob, his girlfriend, and myself watch as the small light, which to me looks like an old kerosene lantern, begins to move. It's swaying back and forth. We sat and watched it in complete silence for what seemed like several minutes, when I finally spoke up and asked what the story was with this. Bob replied he did not know, but locals had told him that at midnight every night this lantern will light up and sway back and forth through the woods until the sun comes up and it disappears. Nobody knew what the story was. At the time, I was a 19-year-old guy who didn't think anything could scare me or hurt me. So since there were no houses around, I yelled out, "We see you! Wow, you were so scary with your little lantern." Bob shushed me, but it was too late. My wife screamed and pointed. I was laughing, but my laughing stopped as I looked to the hillside to see the lantern swing back and forth, but moving down the hillside to the field at an unhuman pace. As it glided, it began to speed across the field towards our car. We didn't stick around to see what it was, because within seconds we were in the car and flying down the dirt road back to the lake. We looked back to see the lantern moving slowly back up the hillside to where it first appeared. The ride back was silent until Bob spoke up, saying, "Crap, I forgot to put gas in it earlier, and only the store around here is closed. And if we decide to go back out anywhere, it'd be best to take my truck until he could get gas in the morning, as he only had about a half of a quarter of a tank." I said okay, and a few minutes later we arrived back at Sugarloaf Lake. We had parked by the lake docks, and we dropped my tailgate and sat and talked about what had just happened. Bob's girlfriend was pregnant at the time and told him she was hungry. He told her we brought some snacks, but she said she needed actual food, but since the local store was closed, he asked if he could take my truck to the next town over to get some food because his car wouldn't have enough gas to get to that town. I obliged. We shut our cooler, put the tailgate up, and loaded into my truck. I turned the key and nothing happened. My truck was dead. Deader than dead. No dings, no lights, no clicks, no noises, no nothing. For all intents and purposes, you would think the alternator was out. This was strange, and after the night we'd had, it just made us all feel uneasy. We got out of the truck and popped the hood. We pulled Bob's car around to the front and attempted to jump the truck with his car. This is where it gets even weirder. As soon as we connect the jumper cables to his battery and mine, his girlfriend starts his car, and within a second, the cables in between the connectors start to smoke, and in a flash of fire, they burn up within seconds. The cables were nothing more than bits of melted rubber and ash, with only the end clamps still on our batteries. Bob runs, turns off his car, and we take the clamps off our batteries. We look at each other in the early moon and starlit night. Did I mention there was no light poles around? And we both get a bad feeling at the exact same time as we suddenly realize we had been hearing a distant noise in the lake that was getting louder and louder. It was a boat motor. Now, like I said, this was the time of year it was starting to get cold, especially at night. We were all bundled up as it is, and we were standing still on a lake at night, but somebody was out on a boat after midnight, when it had to be chilly as all get out with the wind hitting them. And the sound from this motor was getting pretty fast, but we saw nothing. This is until the boat was about 50 yards away and a very bright spotlight comes on, temporarily blinding us. Bob and I tell the woman to get in his car and lock the doors. I reach into the bed of my truck and give Bob a tire tool, and I pick up another. I work at a tire shop and I had all kinds of tools of the trade in my truck. We are standing in front of the vehicles in the middle. The hood's up on both sides and the bull pulls up on the dock. And two heavily bearded men in their 30s and 40s step out of the boat and walk up. It's hard to give an accurate description as their spotlight was still pointed at us and it covered the men in early shadow whilst blinding Bob and I. They look at us and our vehicle at one glance in the direction of the car, at the women, then back at us and let out a small chuckle. "You fellers got some sort of car trouble?" One asks as he lights up a cigarette. "Yeah, but it's nothing we can't handle," I stammer. The guy with the cigarette sniffs the air and looks down between Bob and I's feet and sees the still smoking ashes of what was the jumper cables. "Looks like it was more than your jumper cables could handle. You all need some help? We got some tools on the boat. I think you can fix you guys' problems right up." Then the older man, who had chuckled at the beginning, says, "Fix things right up." I'm speechless at this moment, probably with my mouth hanging open. I can't remember as the two men walk back to their boat, and we hear what sounds like chains rattling around as we try to make out what they are doing, but the spotlight is so blinding we can barely see. The chain noise was enough. Bob looked at me, and without saying a word, we both jumped in his car and drove out of there. For the next few hours, we drove to a populated area of houses, which wasn't many in the rural area we were pretty much stuck in since we had very little fuel. But we all sat in the car, mostly quiet, looking around in all directions in near panic, thinking at any time those men would find us. Bob would turn his lights on every now and then, thinking he had seen some movement in the dark. After a while, the women fell asleep, and Bob and I talked about how weird this whole ordeal had been, and he laughed, saying, "I told you it would be a scary night. I just didn't know it would be this sort of scary." At this point, the paranormal lantern wasn't even the main thing freaking me out, but the men never showed it. Eventually, the morning was on its way, and it was about 20 minutes until sunrise, and Bob asked if I wanted to go see if the lantern really disappeared at sunrise. I asked if he was sure he had enough gas, and he said yeah. The local store opens up in about an hour, so we'll be fine. I tell him in that case, then yeah. We wake the woman up and drive back up the hillside. We get there about 4 minutes left until sunrise, and we still see the lantern swaying in the woods. Bob looked at me and I smiled and do the motion for zipping my lips, and we watch and wonder as right at sunrise the lantern slowly fades away to nothing. After this, we get back in the car and drive back to the lake, feeling safer now. When we get there, there's no sign of a boat. The hood of my truck is still up and the doors are still locked. On a whim, I tell Bob I'm going to try to start the truck one more time before it drives us somewhere where we can get cell signal and call for help. And I'll be damned, the truck started right up with no hesitation or problem. We all went our separate ways, happy to have seen the sunrise and counting our blessings and swearing to leave the paranormal investigating in this area to others, and swearing that we'll never want to come back to this area and run into the boat people again. However, all things fade with time, even fear and common sense. 3 years later, Bob, who I haven't seen in almost 2 years at that point, calls me up and says he has a proposition for me. He goes on to tell me he has a group of himself and 3 other Wiccans who go out and do seances in haunted places, and asks me if I would be willing to film their sessions in the haunted place for their records, and that they would pay me well for my services. I am no Wiccan, but I have always loved the paranormal. Even after what I went through at Sugarloaf, I still had an itch to scratch when it came to getting scared and dealing with the paranormal and the unknown. I told them yes, I would love to film them, but I had no interest in joining in, and that I was okay with watching and just getting to be out there looking into the paranormal again. So, of course, my next question was, when and where are we going to be doing this first? When he answered me, I got a terrible gut feeling, and I wished so much that I had trusted my gut and told him I changed my mind. Remember that lantern light out near Sugarloaf? He asked me, as if there was any other way I could forget. Yeah, I stammered. Why do you ask? I told my group the story, and they want to do a ritual there and see if we can contact the spirit and find out why it is there and what it wants, Bob replied. I don't know, man, I said. Oh, come on, Josh. Trust me, you'll be safe, and I'm going to pay you $250 just to sit there and film it, he retorted. At the time, I was about to become a father, and money was tight because diapers, formula, and cost a small fortune. Not to mention it was my first kid and my new wife's first kid, so she's been going crazy spending money on not just the necessities, but also buying only the top-of-the-line baby products like toys, cribs, playpens, baby monitors, strollers, car seat, a combination pack, and play-changing table, diaper genie, and designer baby clothes. So because my wife was putting us in the poorhouse, I had to weigh out my fear of the area he wanted to go back to with how important it was to make the extra money I could. So against my better judgment, I accepted the offer. A week later, I was in the same beat-down celebrity Bob was driving 3 years before. This time with Bob and 2 guys, 1 girl that were completely strangers to me. They each were dressed very gothic and had these pentagram necklaces or something of that sort. It was 11:50 when we got there, and the 4 of them sat in a tight circle. I was behind them to the right, about 5 feet from the barbed fence that was in front of the field that led to the hillside. And my back was to the hillside and the bushes at the fence line, and I was filming my friend's circle as they started chanting something. As I've been typing this entire post, I've been getting knots in my stomach, knowing that I was coming to this part of the story. This part of the story haunts my dreams and even waking hours to this day. I'm going to do my best to describe how the following events unfolded, though I know mere words cannot do justice to the pure terror that ensued or how horribly horrific the events sounded and were. So when reading or listening to this, turn your imagination all the way up, and believe me when I say up to this point in my life, I was interested in the paranormal. It was a fun hobby to go out and ghost hunting and get myself spooked or whatever. But after this night, I never looked at the paranormal as fun or interesting anymore. I show it respect, and I stay far, far away as possible. As much as I dread it, I will now finish telling the story. As his group is chanting, Bob lights up this huge candle in the middle of them and opens up some sort of book. It is not like a scary antique spell book or anything. It looks like a newer hardcover. Anyways, he starts reciting words from it, and then he looks at his phone and tells his group to be quiet and look at the hill. I turn the camera and at midnight, on the dot, the lantern appears. One member of Bob's group blurts out, "Cool!" I roll my eyes, since the way these people were dressed and the way they carried themselves, the word cool didn't seem to fit their vocabulary. Then Bob says to his group to join hands as they attempt to communicate with the spirit. I turn my back to the light and begin to film the group as they begin chanting again. Bob reads from the book. Then they start asking questions in hopes the spirit will respond. About this time, the wind picks up and Bob's candle goes out. He tells everyone to hold on and tells me cut the camera for a minute, and I oblige and stop recording and watch as Bob tries his lighter, then 2 lighters from his group, but none of the lighters are working. I'm sitting down watching the group when I start hearing a rustling behind me. I jump up, leaving the camera on the ground and spin around. Bob and his group are preoccupied with their candle and lighter problem, and as I spin around, I'm blinded by the brightest light I've ever seen. What I believe was the lantern up close and personal, but as quickly as it appears, the light is gone, and the lantern is nowhere to be seen. If it had been the lantern that blinded me, it had moved from the hillside across the field and right behind me, with me not realizing it within the span of maybe 30 seconds. I look around for the lantern on the hillside and nothing. It's only 12:15 or so, and the light has always stayed until sunrise. At this moment, the wind quits blowing, and I hear Bob's lighter finally flick, and I see it light up, and I mutter, guys, did you see that?" They all turn and ask what I'm talking about, but before I can answer them, we all are stopped dead in our tracks by distant laughter coming from seemingly nowhere and everywhere around us, but distant at the moment, like far off, and this is no ordinary laughter. The laughter sounded like laughter of hundreds, maybe thousands of children. That haunts me to this very moment. As I type, I'm looking around the room I'm in. Whenever I think or talk about this experience, I can vividly remember the terrifying sound and hear it in my head. Also, it just occurred to me that if you put the letters at the beginning of laughter, it spells slaughter. Why did I just think of that? The best way I can describe this laughter is if you imagine listening to a large group of kids singing "Row, row, row your boat." You know how the one kid will start and seconds later another will join in and start at the beginning of the song and so on and so forth? Well, this sounded like that, except hundreds or thousands of children laughing. As if one would start laughing, the second later another would, and the pattern went on in an endless loop. I'm not saying the laughter sounded like a song, "Row, row, row your boat." I'm saying that they laughed in unison, just like kids do when singing "Row, row your boat." One would start, then seconds later another, and then another, and then another, and then another, and the laughter was getting louder and closer. There was sinister laughing, goofy laughing, giggling all around us, coming from all directions. I was shaking. I could not move. I was spinning around and around, looking off in the distance. This couldn't be real. This sort of thing doesn't happen. What the hell was happening? I screamed at Bob and his group that we needed to get the frick out of there, but they already were running for the car, leaving their wicked book and candle behind, and without hesitation I ran after them and jumped in the car just as the laughter became deafening. We hauled our asses out of there and drove about a mile up the road and pulled over as Bob was in no condition to drive. As we were all freaking out, we all get out of the car, pacing around the car, each asking each other if we really heard what we just heard. I tell Bob that I'm sorry, but I left his camera behind. He says he doesn't care and that he isn't going back for it. At this point, I got my hands on my knees, panting, trying to catch my breath, as I have never in my life been so terrified. This is when all of our chatter stops, as we once again hear the laughter off in the distance, very quietly at first, but slowly getting closer and closer and louder, until once again it's becoming deafening. We jump back in the car and speed away. We drive about 6 miles. For the first 3 miles, we can still hear the laughter in the distance with our windows down a little. We began to calm down a little by mile 4 when the laughter can no longer be heard, but we have no intention of pulling over again. And Bob's friend is in the passenger seat with his phone, waiting for a signal to pop up. And about mile 6, Bob's friend says, "Hey, I got full bars." He hands the phone to Bob, and he calls a friend of who is into the occult and well-versed and educated in it, and we're driving, and he's describing what happened to the lady. Bob later told me his friend told him she believes it was the children of Hecate, or something like that. I have no idea what Hecate is, but it sounded like more of a guess to me. Anyways, as Bob is on the phone, speeding out of the area, me and the other people in the back seat all get a chill at the same time. And they told me later, just like me, the hair on the back of their neck stood up as a loud snapping noise came from the front end of the car, and Bob's celebrity stops dead in the tracks and will no longer move forward. He tries everything, but the car is not moving. We later discovered that a tie rod end had snapped. Anyways, the friend Bob was talking to on the phone only lived about 20 minutes away from where we were, and they said they were on their way. As we sat in the car, nobody spoke, and after about 3 minutes, we saw a pair of headlights coming down the road towards us. We knew it was too soon to be Bob's friend, but me and Bob thought maybe we could get a ride from a local, and we unloaded out of the car in front of it, waiting on the vehicle to hopefully stop. Now, I cannot be certain, but my gut tells me I am correct. But the vehicle doesn't stop, but it comes into view. It's a beat-up old truck, and it slows down. And in the truck are two men in their 30s or 40s with huge beards, and they stare at us and speed up after passing by. I look at Bob, and before I can speak, he says what I was already thinking. Those are the guys from the boat. Before I can say anything back, we see headlights coming from the direction the truck had passed by, and just went, and we went still and quiet as the same guys in the same truck passed by slowly again, staring at us on the side of the road. Bob called his friend back and told her to drive like hell and get here now, and hung up. 4 or 5 minutes go by, and we see headlights coming. Relieved, we get all of our stuff ready, think it's Bob's friend. Then his phone rings. It was a lady who was coming to get us, telling Bob she took a wrong turn and it's going to be about 10 to 15 more minutes before she gets there. Bob hangs up the phone and watches in terror as I do as the same truck slowly passes by again, this time with only one of the boatmen in the truck. This time, the driver slows to a crawl and says, "Looks like you fellas could use some help," and then speeds up and drives off. This cemented the fact to Bob and I that we were definitely dealing with the boat guys. But where the hell did the other guy go? Why wasn't he in the passenger seat? And to make matters worse, at this point something had to be almost completely forgot about due to the boatman was immediately reminded to us as we began to hear the laughter again off in the distance. But all around us like before, and over the next few minutes it started to get closer and closer. I'm almost pissing my pants at the sound as it's getting deafening and we have nowhere to run this time. And then from behind our car, off in the distance, we see two sets of headlights coming on and two vehicles coming towards us, slowly side by side, taking up the entire width of the backcountry road, both coming our way. The laughter now seems to be coming from the woods on both sides of the road we're stuck on. The laughing seems to be zeroing in on us if hundreds or thousands of children are within reaching distance of us. There is no wind, no other sound than the crunching of tires on the rocky road of the two vehicles slowly driving towards us. With our last shred of hope fading away into laughter of children and the headlights of two vehicles surely being driven by boatmen, we are giving a reprieve at this time. Coming from the other direction, we see another set of headlights coming fast. We hold our breath, the laughter, the boatmen. What could be next? How will we get out of this? And that is when the vehicle that was coming fast pulls up, and it's Bob's friend. She unlocks the doors to her car and rolls her window down and begins to tell us to get in. When this happens, the two sets of headlights coming from the other direction turn off, and Bob's friend says, "Oh my God, you weren't kidding about the laughing kids." She screamed at us to get in, and we do. We begin to tell her about the boat guys, and she turns the car around, and no sooner than she starts to drive away, the two sets of headlights come on again, this time with their brights on. And they're about a car length behind the car we're all crammed in. I yell to the driver, "Go, go, go, go," channeling my inner Jeff Goldblum, telling her faster, must go faster. She floors it, and for about a mile or two, the vehicles stay on our ass, then turn off onto a side road. For about the next 2 miles after that, we can all hear the laughter, still way off in the distance, with our windows down, and then after 3 miles, the laughter was gone. To this day, I have no explanation to what happened, what the laughing children were, why the laughing followed us, if the boatmen were connected to all of this somehow, or if they were just merely a coincidence that happened to terrify us at the same time as the paranormal stuff was happening. And if that was the case, why didn't they react to the laughing children sound? Is the lantern connected to the laughing children, or did Bob and his group mistakenly call forth the laughing children through their ritual? Like I said, this happened years ago, but I still feel just as terrified now when I tell people about it or think about it. I have had constant chills and goosebumps as I've written this. I'm sorry for typos or grammar issues, but I'm a bit shaky as well. I'm going to post the story as is. I hope it's readable, and I hope somebody who reads this and has a similar experience can share their story with me. In a weird way, I believe this would help me deal with the trauma this experience still causes me to this day. To all of you who think the paranormal is just a fun hobby to get your thrills with, I beg you and I warn you that we are not prepared for what is really out there. You can think nothing will scare you or harm you, but you are dealing with unknown things. You have no idea how powerful or mundane the paranormal can be. If you use the paranormal as a thrill-seeking hobby, just use caution and always have your vehicle checked out beforehand. Oh, and watch out for seemingly sociopathic hillbillies and laughing children. Hope everyone who reads this sleeps well, but I know after telling this story for at least the next few nights, I will be getting no sleep at all. Now, I'm editing my post at this moment. I just remember kind of an important coincidence. When we had driven fast away from the lantern in 2003, after it came swooping across the field towards us, the song Unforgiven by Metallica had been playing on the radio. And then in 2006, when we first heard the laughter, when we were by the hillside and jumped in the car, the same song was on again. This time it was on a mixtape that one of Bob's fellow Wiccans had made and brought. Run When I Say Run, a scary true story, written by user smoking_owl. This is a true story that happened during an evening winter walk on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. This is the original Smoking Owl Tales text. I've written it based on personal experience from many years back. I've also narrated the story myself, and I would love for you to listen to the story on YouTube. Alright, this is a true story that happened several years back when I was 13. This was a time when I was growing up in New York. We actually had a summer house on Cape Cod and spent every other weekend there, if we could. Cape Cod is a peninsula off the east coast of Massachusetts, and it has become very busy, even crowded during summertime. But during the winter season, it becomes empty. The majority of houses in our area are owned as summer houses, so during the winter, the houses are still there, but the people are not. In contrast to New York, there are only street lamps on the single main road in this town. The main road goes from the town center to the beach. Aside from this road, all the others are dark and very black at night. Also, Cape Cod extends out into the Atlantic from the mainland, forming a bay, Cape Cod Bay. Not only can one watch the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, but can watch the sunset over Cape Cod Bay on any given clear day. Another effect of being surrounded by ocean is that there is very little man-made light at night. The stars are so clear that the Milky Way is clearly visible spanning across the sky on clear nights. The story happened during the vacation period between Christmas and the New Year. The Christmas celebrations were finished. There was plenty of leftover turkey and pumpkin pie. We got a bit of cabin fever with all the Christmas food and family one evening. My older sister, who was 7 years older than I, 20 at the time, came up with an idea to take a walk to the harbor. This was about a 20-minute walk from our house. The harbor can be fun because we can walk out on the docks and walk among the boats. While I was a bit creeped out to walk around a deserted beach town on a cold winter night, I also thought it would be fun to get out of the house and maybe even a little bit exciting. We headed out. Across the street from our classic Cape Cod cottage is a field with a forest at the other end. At nighttime, I would also have a little fear that there could be a psycho watching from that tall grass. Perhaps he would have an axe, but while it kept my nerves weary, I knew it was my imagination. But still, icy wind blowing on tall grass is the perfect setting for some horrors. Add to this a moonlit sky with a million sparkling stars and a Milky Way above, and the horror setting is at a Stephen King level. We walked out to the main road, went a bit down the road, and then turned to walk down a side street that leads to the street that dips downhill toward the harbor. This side street runs along the back side of a long hotel. It's more like a 2-level motel, painted light yellow that has a pool. It is well situated in town, so can be full of life during the summer. On this December evening, the hotel was closed for the season, completely dark, and several windows were covered with plywood for protection. My sister mentioned that a hotel that spans the entire block but is partially boarded up reminds her of a horror movie. Like one of those slasher films where the characters make all the wrong decisions and walks into the worst of the dark places just to find their worst nightmare come true. At the end of the street with the hotel, we continued to the left, which is the long road downhill through the woods to the harbor. This isn't a pure forest, but there are houses set back from the road with an occasional driveway. Many of the driveways have reflectors on the rock or a fence or just standing on a metal stick. These reflectors reflect back the headlights from cars. I mention this because we could not see any of them or anything. It was pitch black in the wooded area, and the road seemed to continue into the black. Come to think of it, we had not seen a single car or a single person or a single sign of life since we left our house. My nerves were on edge. I was only 13 at the time, and although my nerves were screaming, I tried to stay calm because I wanted to seem tough for my big sister. The woods alongside the road were particularly nerve-wracking. The trees came right up to the asphalt on each side of the road. They provided many opportunities to hide someone or something. The houses behind the woods were dark because rarely did vacationers come here in the winter. I started to notice that my sister was also starting to lose her nerve, and that's when I felt it. I felt a flush of energy move up the back of my neck. It makes it feel like the hairs are sticking out on end. This is a feeling I get when I'm being watched. It's hard to describe this feeling, but I still get it to this day. Sometimes when someone is looking at me from behind, it's either some kind of sixth sense or it's just my imagination working with some intuition. We were now midway into the wooded area, down the hill towards the harbor. I was starting to lose my shit and was about to stop pretending not to be freaked out and tell my sister, let's go back, when she suggested it. She said, you know, it's late. Maybe we don't have to go all the way to the harbor. I replied back, yeah, plus it's kind of creepy and dark down there. The back of my neck was shivering, and I felt my body shudder as it wrestled between acting relaxed and flipping the switch to fight or flight mode. My sister replied, yeah, very creepy. Come on, let's just go back to the house. We can see the harbor tomorrow. We turned around and she grabbed my hand and we started walking fast back up the hill. I remember that she held my hand so tight it hurt, and my sister never holds my hand. I can't think of another time she did this. And this is where the story takes a deep dive down the rabbit hole. As we got towards the end of the wooded area, my sister screamed out, I've got a knife and I'm not afraid to use it. And she did not lose any rhythm of her fast walking while she said this. We crossed the street now and headed into the street with the backside of the closed two-level motel. My sister continues speed walking and looks back. She let out a little panic noise and looked back again. Then she commanded me, don't look back. I was utterly freaking out at this point. Aside from the eerie vibe of the dark, empty street and my inner panic, I had not actually seen anything out of the ordinary, with the exception of my sister's completely insane behavior. Then she said, when I say run, you run, okay? Okay? We're almost at the main road, a block from our street, and she said, run! We booked it. She let go of my hand and we both broke out in the best sprint we could do. I could hear our footsteps banging the asphalt, and I could hear several other steps banging in the distance. We cut around the grass area to a shortcut towards our street and ran through the front yards of our neighbor's house to make a beeline for the front door of our house. We made it. We both ran in and locked the storm door, which is mostly glass. I was panicking, but not sure if there was anything or if we were just going crazy. It was a strange transition from outside, which was terrifying, to inside the warm-lit house, which seemed safe. I was questioning what happened in my mind. I could sense that my sister was also questioning herself whether there was even a threat or had we both just lost our minds out there. I asked my sister what she saw, and she said there was a man that was standing on the edge of one of the driveways. We walked right past him on the way back. She said that when we were behind the hotel, he crossed the street and was following us. She said he was looking right at us, and although we were walking very fast, he was gaining on us. She explained that it doesn't make sense that a man would be standing out there in the dark, wooded area in the middle of the night. Honestly, I don't understand what happened that night. I'm not sure how much of what my sister said is true, if she was just seeing things or not. One thing for sure, I realized that I prefer walking to the harbor during daylight. Burglary Horror Story by Big Murph 05. I live in a fairly secure area and have two dogs. One is a large Doberman and the other is a poodle. I was home alone as my parents were out for the weekend, and our dogs barked a lot and are very protective. The neighbor hates when the dogs bark. We would often get notes telling us to make the dogs be quiet. One of the more threatening notes said that he would hurt the dogs if they wouldn't be quiet. So my parents had taken them to a kennel to avoid any complications that weekend. I spent the weekend alone playing video games and watching movies. It was the night after they left, and I was playing a video game. I think it was Rainbow Six Siege. I was playing with a few friends online, so I had my microphone on, and I was playing with my window open. My friends kept telling me to stop making that loud squeaky sound. I questioned what they meant, and my friend said that now there was a loud banging. I removed my headphones, and that's when I heard it. The sound of something slamming into the front gate. I peered out, and it was a tall, stocky man with a black hood on, looking down, slamming his body into the fence. The fence in question was weak, and the wood was splitting, so I decided to call the police, and then my parents, but decided to stay near the window so I could still watch the man. I was finally talking to the 911 operator, and the operator told me to lock myself in a room, get out of sight, and that a police officer was on their way. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to continue watching the man outside. He finally broke the wooden gate off its hinges, but he didn't immediately enter. He bent down and grabbed something that he strapped around his shoulders, and upon further inspection, in the moonlight, I saw a hunting rifle strapped to his back. That was when I finally went and hid under the bed, and I listened. A loud shatter broke the silence, which was the back door smashing in, followed by footsteps entering the house. The intruder went room to room and sounded like he was searching for something. He started creeping up the stairs until the sound of the police sirens flooded my ears. That's when I made a stupid decision of bolting, trying to escape the house. I ran and got to the stairs and turned the corner. I was greeted by a large man with a hood and a cloth covering his face. The man gripped my neck with his hands. The police sirens got louder, but by the time the police were knocking at my door, I was quickly losing breath from the man strangling me. The cloth covering his face slipped down to reveal my neighbor. He let me go then and gripped his rifle, aimed it at me, and pulled the trigger, but it didn't fire. The dumbass left the safety on. The police kicked in the door and tased the man. The man was captured and charged with breaking and entering and carrying an unlicensed firearm. I'm thankful that the safety was on, or this could have ended very badly for me. I later went back to my Xbox and told my friends what happened, and then I almost died. A paranormal ghost story. Grandma Loves Me from the Other Side. Written by Yumi130794. I am a 25-year-old female. For the purpose of anonymity, I refer to myself as Sabrina. I'm from Romania. English is not my native language, but I shall try my best to make the story easy to be understood. My stories contain what you would call angels, spirits, demons, archangels, satanic people doing forbidden sessions of voodoo, and everything in between. But for this particular story, I sort of believe this is not necessarily a bad encounter, or so I lie to myself, sometimes. There are many stories that I would love to share with you. You can either decide to share them, I don't mind, but mainly I just wish to talk with someone who has went through what I did and can understand and empathize with it based on your personal experiences. The one story that I can and will share with you for now, I need time to think if I'm ready to share the less fortunate experiences. But I live in Romania. Our country has Orthodox religion, basically very similar to Christianity. We believe in God and Jesus Christ with small certain similarities and differences. For example, I don't know if it's the same as the Catholics believe, but we keep the deceased for a night. We call it the sleeping duty, or guard night. We do not take the body out of the house that they have lived in for their entire life in order to help the spirit find its way to heaven easier. The next 2 days, as we bury the bodies after 3 days, we take the body to the church where loved ones, but not the relatives to the deceased, may come and pay respects to that person. After the process is concluded, we bury the body at the cemetery where the priest will chant prayers, helping the spirit of the deceased understand that they are no longer among the living, as Romanians are very spiritual people and believe in the afterlife, spirits, and even in bad spirits that linger the world unable to move on. Understanding this is important, as the story is pretty detailed itself. I had 5 grandparents, 3 grandmothers, and 2 grandfathers.
My first grandfather, we shall call him Michael, died when I was 6 years old due to a heart attack in August 2007. He raised me, and his death marked my life ever since because I couldn't grasp the significance of death. I would frequently dream about him, his messages, his signs. I would hear him in my dreams as he would guide me to be a good person and so on. But even then, as a child, I knew what a dream was and what reality was. His wife, whom we shall call Anna, was my adoptive grandmother, as my real by-blood grandmother named Margaret had died when my mom was 2 years old due to an abortion. I'm not sure if she was trying to abort my mother or a third child, since my mother has a brother and she was the second child. During the communist years of 1946 to 1989, Romania had a strict law regarding abortions, and women would abort the fetuses on their own, in the privacy of their homes by themselves, as no medics would agree to help them with the procedure due to the fear of being sentenced to life in prison. She died of septicemia, and my mother grew up without a mother until the age of 6 years old. Needless to say, I never met her or knew anything about Margaret, my blood grandmother. But this story is about my grandmother, the adopted one, named Anna. She was a very spiritual, wise, kind-hearted, and intelligent woman. She never held children of her own. She adopted my mom and my uncle. Their names aren't important for the story. My grandfather, Michael, was only dating my grandmother, but after my mother had met her on a family visit on her side in Asai, Moldova, it's a town in Romania, they got married soon after. My grandfather was a military general, and he was trying to raise 2 children, 6 years and 13 years, and it was very hard. How they decided to get married? Well, it was thanks to my mother, because as soon as she first saw Grandma Anna, she went straight to her. At the age of 6, raised both her arms up at her and asked, in a jolly child voice, "Hi, my name is Christina. Would you like to be my mommy?" My grandmother burst into tears, picked her up, and immediately created a connection with my mother, whom she raised and loved as her own. It was not the same for my uncle. He was 13 at the time and knew his own mother, and knew Margaret had died and why. He denounced her and made her life much harder. After raising my mom and uncle, my uncle had 2 children of his own, a boy and a girl. She raised the girl, and when the boy was born, she had a calcium crisis that made her faint and hit her head. She refused to raise my cousin afterwards, as she was afraid she would drop holding the baby. My uncle never forgave her for that and hated her even more. When I was born, I was the light of her life. She loved my mother from the first moment, and my grandfather Michael adored my mother. Because I'm a replica of my mother, same eyes, same face, same body shape, they immediately took to me and raised me, as my father worked in 3 different jobs, and my mom was a pediatric nurse and worked all shifts. I loved growing up with her. Like I said, she was an extremely spiritual person. She loved to meditate. She would tell me about her dreams. She taught me how to decode them and what it meant. She told me about ghost encounters she had in her life. She always told me not to fear any spirit that came close to me in my life, because ghosts see us beams of light guiding them to God when they are confused. Yes, that was my grandmother Anna for you. She did this until I was 18 years old. We were very close, and I was living 5 minutes away from her, so I'd visit her daily. Sometimes sleep at her place still. Her hobby was to read the future in some cards she had owned. Not tarot cards, but normal cards with some inscriptions she had, such as "Encounter with a mysterious man," "Beware," "Crying child," "Careful," "Dangerous woman." I can give you photos of the pack. It's just the words are in Romanian, but I can translate them for you if you wish. Also, I would have to go to my parents' house since I moved from there, and the cards are remaining there. On the New Year's morning of 2017, at 3:15 a.m., I called my grandma Anna to wish her Happy New Year and to let her know how much I and my family loved her and appreciated her. I'd like to mention that Romanians rarely express their love by saying "I love you" to our mothers, fathers, or grandparents. We consider that you show your love by what you do in your life and how you respect them rather than just saying the words. By that night, for the first time in 23 years, at that time in 2017, I felt I needed to tell her that. I still don't know why. Her voice changed. You could hear her chuckle in soft, happy tears as she would hear that, and she loved us all back and forever will. Nothing seemed suspicious, as I am a very sensitive and emotional woman myself, so the night went on as normal. She was at a party, and I was with my fiancé at his house. The next day, 1st of January 2017, at 17:30 p.m., I received a phone call from my father who told me my grandma Anna had died the previous night. I couldn't express it in words how my heart simply left my body, as if my own existence stopped. Refusing to acknowledge that she was dead, I rushed home. The police were there and the ambulance was there too. They said she died of a heart attack due to the climate change, same as my grandfather Michael did 11 years before her by the same cause. Outside it was cold and inside it was too hot, and when she was rushing to change clothes, her heart couldn't handle the temperature change and her body couldn't balance the heat, so she just died. But what I found particularly weird was the time of death. I still had her last phone call at 3:15 a.m. The policeman and the ambulance staff analyzed her and declared her time of death was around midnight. They said there was no way I could have talked to her at 3:15 a.m., as for that time the body would have already begun the rigor mortis stage. But who did I talk to? Because it was her phone number, it was her voice, and she seemed incredibly fine. Call it a sick joke or just medical staff time of death error, it was just creepy. During her funeral, I decided to write her a goodbye letter, as I am very spiritual, and even though no one will read it, I like to consider that she took the message I had for her to heaven to pass it down to my other grandmother, Margaret, and my two grandfathers, Michael and Peter. I wrote in the letter that I do love her a lot, and I thank her for every sacrifice she'd done for me, and I wish to tell Margaret, the real grandmother, which I've never met because she died from the abortion long before I was born, that I loved her too, although I never got to meet her. I put the letter in my grandmother's coffin, kissed her forehead, and watched her go on her last road. My mom knows about the letter. She yet has never asked me about what I wrote in it. After her funeral, I get a phone call from my grandmother. Yes, my Nana Anna. At first I thought it was my father, as he would still use her phone to let all her relatives from other countries know that she had passed away. So normally I answer the phone and I hear something unimaginable, impossible, formidable. I hear my Nana Anna. I hear her voice clearly. I hear her voice laughing, but nothing scary, nothing forceful or intimidating. It made me feel like she was indeed there, but I would admit the whole situation did freak me out. She said to me, "Hello, dear. I called to let you know I passed the message and I love you too." I couldn't reply as the phone call hung up right after. It left me feeling so vulnerable, as I thought maybe someone is playing a sick joke, but it couldn't be that. I saw my Nana be buried myself. I saw the coffin as it was sealed. I saw the letter exist inside the coffin until the very last second. No one took it out to read it. She had 3 sisters, but they were all dead and none of them had her voice. No one could have repeated her voice that perfectly. But the even scarier part comes after the first phone call. After another week, I remember it was a Monday. My phone starts ringing again under the same number. I answer it. Already I've forgotten about what had happened earlier, and I hear an old lady's voice. A voice that I felt was familiar. I did not know who the lady was. It was a pretty soft but strong voice. It felt like a relatively young woman, but an experienced woman. I would say around 30 to 40 years or so. I would like to mention that this time I was in the same room with my father, who had my grandma Anna's phone when I received the call. Her phone is in front of me on the table, not ringing, and I open her phone as I speak on my phone. Her phone had no battery and it was closed and dead, but I still get a phone call from it. I answer. I hear this weird lady and she goes like this. "Hello, sweetheart. You don't know me, but I know you. I received your message and I love you too." Then the phone call hangs up again. Needless to say, I started screaming and panicking so hard that my dad immediately went to the telephone service to find out who was playing pranks on us. They went through her profile, numbers that were dialed and received. My number was not in her agenda of calls, so we decided to disable her number. Ever since then, we do not receive any of the strange calls anymore, but I do go to the cemetery more often to talk to them. This year is the first year from her death, so we are sort of celebrating her memory. But for me personally, I do not celebrate her memory, as I feel she is constantly physically with me. I've often have dreams of her. She would often visit me at night. I'm saying dreams because I feel like I'm going insane if I conclude on these situations being something other than dreams. I guess I'm trying to thank you for giving me the possibility to share this with you. If you want to share my story further, to all the people out there who encounter ghosts or paranormal activity, I'm going to say what my grandma Anna taught me all my life. Do not be afraid of them, as they are confused, lost souls, who see you as beams of light, helping them to find God. The way you feel about them will conclude in the way they react, and afterwards end up scaring you. The Yokosuka Banshee, written by Crazy Mr. Gigabyte. At the time, I was serving in the military overseas in Yokosuka, Japan from 2012 to 2014. Since my time there, I was settled, and I had been there for 2 years and seeing a very lovely girl named May. May had told me she was pregnant with my child while I was on my deployment. I took responsibility for my actions, so we started to plan. During the second year of my service during the winter, 6 months since May gave me the news, my ship had been in dry dock for a year, and each ship, depending on how large the ship's crew is, had a handful of duty sections. A group of crew members who watched the ship and took care of it while the rest of the crew was off. So it was my section that was on duty this night. During our evening meal, one of my shipmates asked me if I could switch watches with him. Being that my current watch was standing in the freezing cold for 5 hours, he thought giving me his barracks watch would lift my spirits. It did. I took the proposal in a heartbeat. We both let our section leader know of the change. At 23:45, I was on to my barracks to watch the barracks from 2400 to 0600. The barracks watch was there for safety and to see that the right people were in their respective rooms. I arrived right on time with 5 minutes to spare. I bought myself and the person I was relieving a coffee because I thought it would help him on the cold walk home. As the night progressed, I made my rounds every half hour. When the wee hours of the morning came around, I started to doze off. I was awoken by a resident who couldn't sleep due to their neighbors crying. "If you can get that girl back in her room and keep her quiet, I won't tell the supervisor that you were sleeping," he muttered, as if I didn't have a choice. The barracks was 3 floors high, full of people, but at this hour the silence had a certain eeriness to it. Like you could hear your own heart beat. My footsteps echoed like if I was in some sort of catacomb. As I made my way upstairs, I began to hear sobbing. I shook my head in disappointment. "This should be fun," I said to myself. I reached the 3rd floor and I made my way down the hallway. The sobbing sounded like it was coming from the laundry room. Maybe the poor girl didn't want to wake her roommates, I thought to myself. As I made my way into the laundry room, the sobbing was low, like she was trying to hide it. I stepped forward. "Miss, are you okay?" I whispered. I turned the light on and I saw a young girl sitting on the floor facing the wall, leaning on the washing machine. I asked again, "Miss, are you okay?" I put some strain on it so she may hear me past all the sobbing. I still was waiting for a response, but still got nothing. It was late and I was tired and I was getting impatient, so I got closer to her. "Hey lady, are you alright? I think you should call it a night," I yelled as I walked closer. Just as I did, the girl sprung up quickly. She looked sick, dark eyes, greasy hair. She didn't look happy like I'd ruined her crying game. Before I could open my mouth, she let out an ear-shattering scream, and it just kept climbing in pitch. I got closer to try to shut her up, but the noise was too much, and I collapsed. The last thing I heard was the sickly girl, with her menacing face staring straight at me, screaming at me. All of a sudden, I woke up in the office where I watched the cameras. I would write it off as a bad dream from eating gallery food, but I felt different. I felt cold. I was never left in the office for the rest of my watch. A week later, I got news from May. She told me that there were complications with the baby. She had a miscarriage. I couldn't help that the young girl and my night terror and the miscarriage could be linked. I'm back stateside now, and the experience has left major impressions on me. I hope you all enjoyed all of our haunted tales this evening. If you would like to discuss any of the stories on tonight's podcast, or just chat live with me, join our Discord server. I'm always live on there during and after the podcast every Sunday night starting at 7 p.m. Join our community on our Facebook group page and YouTube channel. If you have a haunting story of your own or artwork and you want to submit it for consideration for the future show, drop me a line on our Reddit page or email address. All our links are below in the description. Special thanks to Darken Mood, Darken_M00D, for all his wonderful art that you can check out on his Reddit page. I want to thank all our brave storytellers, for without them there would be no show. A detailed list of story credits are in the description. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the listener, for taking time out of your day to listen to Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I hope you have a wonderful night, and as always, sweet dreams.
Alright, well that's tonight's broadcast. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to drop it down in the comments. If you are just checking in and at the tail end, you can always check on the YouTube channel. I always upload after the live. Also, feel free to share it around. Let your friends know about it. We're growing as a community. We're almost at 1,500. We're about 79 shy of 1,500 members. So that's exciting. Make sure you tune in to The Orion Effect, which should be coming on after on Blog Talk Radio. This is a production made possible by the Rift Radio Network. We have a bunch of variety different of hosts and shows for different interests. Make sure you check them out so you can check out the other hosts and what they're doing, because there's some really original content going on there. Alrighty, well, I want to wish everybody a wonderful night, and as always, sweet dreams.